Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Science of the Times. I'm Syma Khalid.
And I'm Tim Colson.
So how are you doing, Tim?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad at all. How about you? I mean, kind of autumn's now here, isn't it? You know, summer's sort of a distant memory, but hopefully we'll still get a few more sunny days.
Yeah, I think so, hopefully. But really looking forward to today's podcast episode.
It's all about bats, and I mean, you're a bit batty, so presumably that's why you're so excited by it.
That was so low. I was thinking he won't do it. He won't go there. But of course you did. And I suppose you consider yourself to be the Batman.
Well, actually, I think the person we're interviewing is really the Batman. I mean, it's super knowledgeable about bats. He kind of does a mix of how bats sense the environment as they're flying around. And there's I think about 1,500 bat species out there, and they can see, but they also use this clicking, this echolocation to paint images of where they're going. So I'm sure we'll learn lots about that.
Yeah, really, really looking forward to it, actually. I mean, I'd say bats are sort of universally popular, aren't they? And I think it's something humans have, well, I don't know, say always sounds, makes me sound like a Methuselah or something, but certainly as long as I've been alive and, sort of humans have had a fascinating interest in bats. So yeah, shall we get him on?
Let's get him on. Yeah, excellent. So it's an absolute delight to have Yossi Yovel on the line, who's authored a book that's just come out, The Genius Bat. It has a slightly different title, I believe, Yossi, subtitle, Yossi, in the US. But perhaps you could introduce yourself, first of all, and then tell us about the US title, perhaps.
Sure. So first of all, thanks for inviting me, Tim and Syma. I'm Yossi Yovel. I'm a scientist in Tel Aviv University. I like to say that I'm a neuroecologist, which is a strange title. This means that I'm somewhere in between neuroscience and ecology. I think these are two huge fields of science that usually do not communicate to each other too much, with each other too much, and I think they should, because basically they're looking at two sides of the same coin, right? On the one hand, ecologists are looking at the interactions between animals and their environment. Maybe we could say this something like this very, very generally. And on the other hand, neuroscientists are trying to understand how the brain operates organisms' behavior. At least those are the parts of neuroscience that I'm interested in. And I'm trying to somehow, I'm trying to attend conferences in both fields and somehow help to bridge this gap. I don't want to say I'm bridging this gap. That's too much to say.
Yeah, okay. No, but you're in Canada at the moment, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm on sabbatical in Canada, and I'm affiliated with McGill University. I enjoying sabbatical.
But you've already written a book. I thought sabbaticals for write a book, or are you writing another one?
Yeah, I'm trying to write another one. I usually write 5 in the morning, 5 a.m. That's those are my hours of writing. I try to write like an hour every day before the day begins. I'm trying to write something that is a little bit more general about animal sociality in general. I mean, there've been quite a few books already, good ones, but I'm trying to give it a different angle. And as you've seen with the previous book, I also include a lot of my personal experiences.
Yeah.
So out of the things that I'm doing now, which I really love, and being here in North America is a huge advantage. I go to visit other researchers who do work in the tropics, Central America, South America. I join them in the field. For me, first of all, it's amazing always to see how other people work, and the fact that I'm here makes it much easier for me. So that's going. Hopefully, all of this will go into maybe a second book.
Okay, well, good.
Obviously, I must say your working practices also reflect Tim's. He also gets up at 5 a.m. to start writing, don't you, Tim?
I do, but normally I go to the pool at 6 for a swim. So
I have 3 kids. The youngest still 2 years old, so no pool for me at those hours yet.
You don't know, but with young kids, you get enough exercise as it is, I think. So
Yeah.
I wonder if so I'll kick off, Simon, and then you can ask
Sure.
the next one. So, you're well known, Yossi, for your work, particularly on bats, and that's what your first book is about. And you've done some, really groundbreaking research on kind of bat sonar, biosonar. What would you say the most kind of surprising thing that you've learned about bats as you've been doing this work? I mean, you call your book The Genius Bat, so and it's packed with facts from vampire bats from tiny little hummingbee bats, right the way through to flying foxes and what have you. What is there? And there must be one or two things that have just blown your mind.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to disappoint you, but I always say science is not a surprise party. I mean, a lot of what we do, I think, is to try to confirm hypotheses that have always been there or questions that have always been there. And, if the result is really surprising, we should sometimes check our results again. I think, people tend to think everything has to be really a surprise, at least, when I talk to people who are not scientists. And I think we should be careful. Surprising results are usually we should be careful with. But I want to tell you about a recent result, which I think is mind blowing, even though it's been an hypothesis since ever. So since I became interested in bat echolocation, which is somewhere around 2002, 3, I went to do my PhD in Germany in Tübingen, and one of the main questions was, okay, bats can use sonar. Right, of course, right. That's what they do. But echolocating bats, by the way, all bats can see. We should say this. It's sometimes people don't know this, but bats can also use vision, and people have mostly studied echolocation indoors. Right, we place a bat in a room and we have it. We train it to do some task, or we just observe its behavior. And people have shown that bats have remarkable spatial orientation in these small confined environments. So, for example, people have shown. Cindy Moss from Maryland University at the time showed that bats can return to the same exact spot in the room on a mesh or on a wall, remembering acoustically, because it's all in complete darkness, remembering the structure and position of the room with accuracy of centimeters, maybe.
Wow.
But for me, yeah, that's amazing. But for me, the question was, and if you're asking me about amazing results, some of the most amazing results have been already found 50 years ago, showing that bats can compute or estimate the accuracy of distance of objects with an accuracy of less than 1 millimeter. So when they're intercepting prey, for example, they know probably where this prey is within a less than a millimeter of error. And this has been found by giants like Uli Schnitzler and Jim Simmons, who are all interviewed and mentioned in the book. But sorry, let's go back to my own. I will drift a lot probably during this talk, but this interview. So one of the main questions for me as a student was, and I believe for others too, okay, they can use echolocation, sonar, sound, but can they use it outdoors? Can they also navigate many kilometers with this? And people write things based on observations which are very limited. I'm not trying to reduce the results of anyone, but that's what we could do. Because what people could do for many, many years is observe bats in the field with binoculars or thermal cameras or maybe microphones, and we can only see them for these very brief instances when they go by. And then we can say, okay, we see them going near trees, so maybe they're using the trees to navigate, right? But we couldn't really observe the same individual over very long periods of time. And one of the things that we've done, and today others are also doing this, is to develop very small sensors that include GPS devices and microphones, which can be mounted on the bats and allow us now to track the same individual bat. By the way, the main challenge was that the bats are small, very small, usually 20, 30 grams. So we had to have very, very small miniature devices. And these now allow us to observe the same individual bat over a complete night, full nights. Okay, so maybe one of the most exciting events in my scientific career was somewhere 2012, I think, or 11, no, probably 12. We just managed to get one of these devices back because it's a logger, the data is on the device, and we plug it in the computer and we're sitting and waiting for hours because it's very slow, the download is very slow. And then eventually we see this map and we see what our bat did during the entire night. And that was like, wow, mind-blowing for me. And back to the results. Sorry, this is a long answer to a short question, but recently we showed actually that bats can navigate using sound only. So they really can use echolocation in order to probably build some kind of a map, acoustic map of the environment, even over many, many kilometers. And they can probably use sound only when they need to do so, because they also have vision, so they can use that when it's available. But when they need to, some bats at least can probably navigate over many, many kilometers just based on the echoes, on the sounds of the environment, which I think is maybe not surprising, but still really, really mind-blowing.
So,
Yeah.
Yossi, do you think there's any, do you think there's any scope in that sort of what we've learned about bats and this remarkable ability to use sonar for the development of artificial sensing devices?
Yeah, of course. The simple answer is of course. People have been doing a lot of stuff with radar for many, many years.
Sure.
A lot of military applications, but recently autonomous cars, autonomous vehicles, a lot of civilian applications. I must say, bats are a million times better than anything we can do today, even with the most sophisticated radar devices. So take, whatever American cutting edge technology. I'm saying American because usually, with military technology, usually it's there. And they will not come near to the abilities of a small bat, which is flying within vegetation, remembering where it is, as I said, navigating kilometers, avoiding collision, hunting for prey. Nothing can do this, especially nothing in this size. Now, there are a lot of similarities between sonar and radar. So a lot of what we learn from sonar can be maybe applied with radar systems as well. A big major difference is the range. So echolocation sonar in air only works for very nearby objects. And so a bat can only see, right, with its ears for up to meters away. Sometimes that's an advantage. There are a lot of disadvantages. If you think of a car on a road, maybe it's not very good, but sometimes there are advantages because you don't get a lot of what we call clutter, a lot of background undesirable noise when you have such a short-ranged sensor. And for example, we have been involved in a lot of agriculture applications. So a colleague of mine and me in the past few years, we've shown that we can use this sonar in order to, for example, estimate yield. So, for example, you have a farmer with a greenhouse, he's growing tomatoes. He wants to know, or she wants to know, how many kilos of tomatoes are there, and are they ripe? Should we pick them? How many trucks should I prepare to collect them? And this is today, people are trying to do this with cameras, not very successfully. Yeah. And we've shown that sonar, is advantageous. Maybe I'll just say in a word, because the sound waves, which sonar uses sound waves, they can penetrate the foliage. They can enter the vegetation and provide information also from within. And there are a few other advantages, but that's I think one interesting direction that can be learned and applied.
So,
wow, I didn't expect you to say that. I have to say that's remarkable.
So along those lines, Yossi, and kind of following on, back in, I think it was 1974, the American philosopher Thomas Nagel wrote a famous paper called "What Is It Like to Be a Bat?" And you're, a neuroecologist, as you explained at the beginning. So you're interested in how bats are sensing the world, how they're using that information. Can we ever know? I know this is a very philosophical question, but you have kind of written about consciousness in bats as well. So what is it like to be a bat, do you think, now we're starting to understand how they sense the world around them?
That's my dream, first of all. I mean, I would pay, I would pay anything to be inside a bat's brain for, even 1 minute. Really, I would give everything I have, and I would never be there, right? That's of course the conclusion from Nigel's paper. And by the way, he's actually interviewed in the last the prologue of the book. There's a short interview with him. Yeah, I actually wrote this after the book was all. I didn't think he is available, and then I got some contact with him, and he was very nice and interesting to talk with, and even told me the history of why did he even write this paper about a bat, or at least one of the reasons that he had a bat. He had a colony of bats in his attic or roof. Yeah, and a bat entered the house several times, I think, and he observed this alien creature. And for me, discovering the history behind these things, this is, maybe people who don't know, this is like one of the most famous papers in philosophy. There's no student who goes through philosophy, a degree in philosophy, without reading this paper in his first or first year. Yeah, so of course we will never know what it is like to be a bat, right? That's the hard problem,
your
right?
Work is kind of giving us a little bit of a better idea than Nagel would have known, right?
Yeah. So I will never know what it is to be a Syma or a Tim, right? That's the whole problem. But still, I can try to study it and try to imagine. There's still fundamental questions that we don't know. For example, can and does a bat reconstruct a 3D image of the world based on the acoustics? So we know that bats can do, like as we do with vision, right? So we know that bats do a lot, right? They classify, they identify objects, they avoid collisions, they detect other bats, and they do all of this with sound. But what exactly does the representation of the world, of the acoustic world, look like in their brain? We have no clue. Maybe I can tell you about one study where I like to say we went one step closer to understanding what it is like to be a bat. In this paper, by the way, this was one of the, again, I don't know if surprising, but one of the most interesting, I think, findings that we had in the past a few years. What we did is we tried to change. So everything, of course, for sonar, everything depends on the speed of sound, right? Because you emit a call, an echo, you receive an echo, and then your brain, using the speed of sound, computes that, the wall in front of me is 1.5 meters or something like that. Now, we know that the speed of sound is not constant. It changes. It changes depending on temperature. It changes, right, with pressure. And we were wondering whether whether this is flexible, whether when they're flying around, they can somehow assess the speed of sound and adjust their sensing. Because if not, they would be inaccurate, right? And, I'm not going into all of the details, but one of the things that we've done in this study is to actually rear young bats in a helium-enriched environment. So we changed their world. Yeah, we changed their world, basically. We created a world where the speed of sound is faster. And then we asked, by carefully examining their echolocation, whether it is different from other bats that grew up in a normal environment where the airspeed is the same as yours and mine. And without all of the technical details, the result was both groups sensed the world completely exactly the same. So there was no difference, which brought us to the conclusion that the speed of sound is hardwired, if you wish. There's like a fixed reference of the speed of sound in their brain. It probably has been written by evolution, right? And it does not change depending on the environment. So in one of the experiments, the cool experiment that we've done, the bats had to land on a target at a certain distance. And when you enrich the environment with helium, they underestimate, right? Because the speed of sound is faster. Yeah. So they perceive the object as being closer, and they land before the target. Okay. And they're puzzled. Yeah. And they're puzzled. And then they try climbing on it, and then they learn to compensate, but they don't learn the new speed of sound. So you see them once every 10 trials, they will kind of flap harder and arrive at the target.
That's really interesting. That's amazing.
Yeah. This is, by the way, a student of mine, Rana Michai, who's done all of this work. This is a lot of very difficult work. You have to keep the helium environment constant, and it's very, very difficult. A lot of work, and I think we depleted the helium resources of the world.
Become higher in pitch, because if we breathe helium, that sounds a little bit like Syma.
Right. So no, and we were wondering, and I'll explain. At first, I also wasn't sure why, and the reason is that what happens, your vocal cords still oscillate at the same frequency, but we have multiple resonances. And what happens when you change the speed of sound in this vocal tract, right, of yours, then the higher harmonics become emphasized, right? And it's not as if the basic oscillation changes, just the emphasis changes. And with bats, since they use a very, very wide band signal, maybe you will see a slight change of energy, but basically it's not something that is easy to measure. It more or less stays the same. I just want to say, so how does this bring us closer to understanding what it is like to be a bat? Again, just maybe 1 millimeter closer. So if the speed of sound is fixed, this is like saying, basically, and this is a kind of a philosophical jump, but it's like saying there is no speed of sound because it doesn't matter. It's multiplying everything by a fixed number. So it's like not multiplying it at all. And this kind of brought me to the conclusion. And by the way, Jim Simmons in Brown has said this for years, but for me, this is it's kind of confirming his hypothesis that the bat's brain doesn't work with distance. It actually works with time, at least when using echolocation. So things around it are 10 milliseconds away and not 1.7 meters away. And I think this is a small step in understanding bats better.
Syma.
So Yossi, do you think sort of the work you've done on understanding bats um, in any way gives you a broader understanding of sort of animal cognition and the ways the sort of sensory perception and processing happens in animals in general?
For sure. I mean, we always, as biologists, we always have to think about the general picture. I mean, we are also sometimes interested in the unique, right? Sometimes discovering some animal that is doing something very unique is also worthy and also important. But we also think generally. I'm trying. So in the past, I started off as what we call a sensory ecologist, really interested in sensing. But more and more, I became interested in other behaviors. So, we study social behavior, vocal communication, navigation, which we already discussed. So really, and all of these are general cognitive capacities or behaviors that other animals have. So, in one study, for example, we show maybe this is I'm thinking which of the studies to mention. So there is a study where we show how fruit bat pups learn to navigate. Okay, so these pups, imagine you're a bat. You've spent your first 2 months in a cave, and then you fly out for the first time, and you can easily fly 50 kilometers, easily without any problem, and then you need to find your way back home, right? It's crazy. It's impossible. I mean, when we leave a hotel room in a new city and try to find our way back, right, from 500 meters, we're lost sometimes if we don't pay careful attention to where we walked, or we use a map, or today it's an app, right? So what we found is that these bats, their mothers will carry them out from the cave and place them on a tree that is somewhere around 1 kilometer from the cave. And then the mothers will forage. They will fly very far and come back after several hours, collect them and take them back home. And they do this again and again, night after night, for several weeks. Okay, I don't remember exactly the number. And then after more or less 2.5, at the age of more or less 2.5 months, the mothers will fly out and just leave their pups in the cave. Okay, and we interpret this as okay, now you're on your own. You have to just go out. And most pups will go out. Some will not, by the way. And then the mothers will go back, one step backwards, show them the behavior, do the behavior again, and then go out. And we interpret this as kind of encouraging them to go out. And indeed, what we find is that the pups, the first thing they will do is to fly to the same tree where the mothers, we call it the drop-off tree, where they drop them off during the past several weeks. And they will follow the same route, which is surprising because it seems like they're learning to navigate, even though they're carried. And we know that passive learning is very difficult, right? When we backseat driving is very difficult. We don't learn much from this in these situations. So the pups seem to be learning, and we interpret this tree as a kind of an anchor for navigation to avoid the situation that I described before. So now the pup, there is one place that it knows, it's like teaching your child maybe to walk to school or something like that.
Yeah.
There is one place where you know how to get to, and you know how to get home from. And then from there on, and that's what the pups do, we know this because we place the GPS on the pup as well. From there on, you start exploring the world carefully. You move a little bit farther on your own, and you start discovering new trees. But there is an anchor from where you can find your way back home. And we even had one very remarkable case in which the pup went out, like I said, it was on the tree. The mother came back to the cave. This is already 3 a.m. and the pup is not there. And an hour later, so again, if I'm trying to put myself in the inside the bat, she's like, "Where's my pup? Where's my pup?" Because they still lactated this time, this period. And so where is it? Nowhere. Okay, at 4 a.m., an hour later, she flies out. Where does she go to? To the same tree. She knows that's probably where I can find it. And indeed, she finds it there and brings it back home. So again, I don't know exactly if this is what other animals do, but I can imagine that this is a very good general strategy to teach your pup how to orient in space and navigate.
We should have a brief break at this point, so we will return shortly.
Hi, Tim. You're looking particularly snazzy today. What are you wearing?
I'm wearing a piece from a company called Grace and Garbo. And actually, you know a little bit more about them than I do, to be honest.
Yeah, you're right, I do. And
You're the fashion queen. Yeah.
I'm also wearing a piece from Grace and Garbo. So this is a delightful knitwear outfit set up in Birmingham. What they do is they source knitwear, quality knitwear from all around the world. So it's vintage, one-off pieces, many of which they then hand embellish, like the one you're wearing today with its beautiful purple flowers. And so they're big on sustainability. Nothing goes to waste. Everything is sort of recycled and reused. And if you want to know more about them, then have a look at the link beneath this episode.
And thank you very much to them for supporting our podcast. I hope their sales soar.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Grace and Garbo.
So welcome back. We're talking to Yossi Yovel about bats. And so we'll just, 2 or 3 more questions because we're running out of time here. But you're talking a little bit about social context there. So you were just been talking about mums and their offspring. But how do bats use echolocation in social contexts? So as well as finding their way around, do they use it to communicate with one another? Do they pass information between themselves?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, indeed, this is one of the most interesting questions that many researchers are interested in. And like you said, echolocation is something that is currently out there. It's used, its major use is sensing, but it makes sense that if it's currently available, then other bats would learn to use or to extract information. Now, perhaps the most common case is eavesdropping. So when a bat is attacking prey, the echolocation sequence becomes much, much faster. So if in the normal situation we're searching for prey, a bat would emit a signal every 100 milliseconds, like something like this is a slowed down version. Toot, toot, toot. When it is closing in on a prey, it will go up to 200 emissions per second, even at the fastest rate. Wow. So it will go up to okay, which is also fascinating because they're acquiring more information basically. But for a different bat, what we call a conspecific, right? This means that somebody is attacking food. It means that somebody found food basically, and it is known for many researchers have shown that bats are attracted to these sounds. They know that somebody else has found food, and you can even see interspecific interest or interaction. So if these are species that feed on similar food, they will eavesdrop on other individuals from a different species. What we have shown in with our work with the GPSs is that these echolocation signals can also be used probably for tracking together. So some bats benefit from moving in a collective and searching in a group because when food is patchily distributed, so it's hard to find the food, but there's a lot of food. Imagine a swarm of insects. Then it makes sense to search in a group because if somebody finds food, everybody will find food. And basically, we show using modeling that these bats can spread out in space, search individually, but also listen to the echolocation signals of others, and the search becomes much more effective when they do so. And again, they're only using echolocation. Nobody is communicating directly. Nobody is saying, "Look, I am number one. Follow me. There is food here." It is only based on listening to their echolocation signals.
No, really interesting, Syma.
Yeah, so actually, Yossi, I wanted to just change tack a little bit now and ask you about this intriguing BBC article about your work on basically animals reacting to secret sounds from plants is the headline. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Sure. So a few years ago, we started studying plant sounds. A colleague of mine, Lila Hadani, she's an evolutionary biologist who studies plants, came up with the idea of recording plants. I was skeptical, but we have a lot of ultrasonic equipment in the lab, so we said, why not? And her student, or our joint student, came to me and said, look at these clicks. There are clicks constantly. And I said, that must be an artifact. We know that these systems create a lot of clicks. And we took a lot of, we ran a lot of controls, mostly placing several different microphones together and, making sure that, if it's noise, internal noise, you would not see correlations in the different microphones. And for sure, these plants emit ultrasonic or produce ultrasonic clicks, very brief signals around 50 kilohertz. Now, I must say, after observing this and being convinced, we read the literature and we found that a lot of people have described vibrations. So a lot of people have described, placing your sensor on the plant, the stem mostly, and then you see that the plant is vibrating in these frequencies. So, it was all about just checking whether the sound is airborne, which is what we did. Now, of course, if the sound is airborne, it means that other organisms can sense it potentially, right? That immediately drew my interest as a bioacoustician and somebody who's interested in animal acoustics and sound. So, we started thinking, okay, which animals can hear these high frequency sounds? Bats, rodents, there are some mammals, of course, that can do this. And of course, there are a lot of insects. And we had to think of a model that we can study and that would also be relevant. And we decided to study moths. Many moths can hear ultrasound. There are different hypotheses why they evolved this ability. One of them is that to avoid bat predation, actually. There's a whole chapter about this in my book. But it might also be social. So male moths also emit courtship clicks in high frequency clicks. But we know that for a moth, one of the main interactions of a female moth with a plant is when it lays its eggs, right? Because it wants to find a good hydrated plant where its descendants, right, where its offspring will not be eaten by a predator and the plant is not too dry or something like that. Now, what I forgot to say is that we found that the plants produce more of these sound clicks when they are dehydrated. So there's information there that might be relevant for the organisms, and this is one of the main ones. So we decided to run a classical sensory ecology task where we have the animal, the female moth. It's about to lay its eggs. It has been fertilized, and it has two options: either to lay it. Maybe I'll describe one of the experiments because there were several. So in one of the experiments, there are two plants. They're both hydrated. They're identical as much as we can see. But one of them is associated with a speaker that we place, of course, that is playing these sounds that plants usually, so these are tomato plants, and these are sounds that tomato plants produce when they are dehydrated. So we basically recorded these sounds ourselves, and we are now producing them. And what we found is that the moth will prefer significantly to lay its eggs on the silent plant. So, the dehydrated plant, basically, and this is very, very significant. We have a lot of controls. I think we don't have time to go into them, but I think this is a very strong indication that moths take sound into account when making decisions about where to lay their eggs, and probably plant sounds when doing so.
No, it's fascinating stuff. And there's all this noise and all this communication going on out there. Next time I'm out in the garden, I'm going to be listening to see which tomato plant to harvest. But we're coming towards, we better wrap up because we're sort of running out of time. But thank you very much for joining us, Yossi. And again, for our listeners and our readers, your book is just out. It's called The Genius Bat. The subtitle in Europe is Understanding Our Most Mysterious Mammal. It's really well worth a read. It's fantastic. And I think you've got the American version there as well. Perhaps you want to hold that up. There we go.
It's blurred. Maybe I can remove.
Maybe hold it close to your head because your head is in focus. Oh, there we go.
There. So
the
subtitle.
Yeah, it's a really. I mean, bats are just there's a large number of species. They're fascinating individuals. Great personal stories as well, and you've gone and interviewed, as you mentioned, various people in the field. So congratulations on the book, and I hope it does really well. So thank you very much for joining us, Yossi.
Thank you very much, Tim and Syma. It was a pleasure.
Wow, that was really interesting, Syma. I mean, isn't it interesting the way he's bringing together the sort of ecology? We didn't talk about the conservation, but he has a bit in his book about that as well. But bringing the ecology and the neuroscience, as it were, of bats together, and I just thought it was fascinating.
Yeah, me too. And also the sort of technological aspects and the sort of applications. I mean, I think I really genuinely wasn't expecting him to say what he said about the agricultural use,
Mm.
sort of where they're using it to sort of check up on the ripeness and abundance of tomato plants.
But it's also amazing, isn't it, that but bats have been around for millions of years, but they're clearly way better at using sonar and echolocation than anything we're capable of doing yet.
Yeah, yeah, no, well, absolutely. I mean, I think both of us are probably, this is why we're sort of biologists, right? There's biology still does things better than we do synthetically,
But
right?
also, yeah, but also, isn't it amazing? There's a whole other sense out there that we don't experience.
Yeah.
That echo, wandering out. If I tried to walk around Tesco's foraging for food with my eyes shut, clicking, well, not only would I probably be
Correct.
arrested, but I'd walk into the Weetabix and, probably stumble into the milk fridge or something.
If you try it, will you video it for our viewers?
Yeah, no, and I mean it's clear as well from what he was saying about the way they've shrunk down technology, but they are really starting to sort of get a much better understanding of how they collect information, how these bats collect information, and how they can use it to navigate, and the fact they train their young in that way as well. I didn't know any of that at all. That was
So that was
it's in his book,
beautiful.
but yeah.
That was absolutely beautiful. The tree using the trees and then sort of can't find the pup, but let's go and check in the tree. It's most likely to be there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, no, it was really cool stuff. I enjoyed it, and I mean, I guess it's interesting as well that insects and moths as well are also using some of this
yeah.
echolocation, and that the fact these poor plants they get stressed, they can't like help themselves, but they're clicking away, and then that's bringing in the that were laying their eggs were avoiding it, but it probably brings in pest insects as well, right? They'll probably think, oh, look, there's a weak plant.
Yeah, I mean, as I sort of laughed when you said it, but it's a really serious point that there's this whole sort of world in our world that we don't experience. As you said, we're walking around, and actually, everything's a battleground, right? It's sort of plants and animals and things we can see, things we can't see, communicating in ways we can perceive, in ways we can't. So there's sort of like multi layers of communication, battle, whatever going on that we're completely ignorant of as we walk around.
No, and there's still so much more to learn, and I think that's kind of one of the things that came across. And we still don't know what it's like to be a bat.
Well, I don't.
So you're not a vampire after all, is that what you're saying?
I don't think so.
Well, look, I better go, but it's been great as ever to see you, and we'll see you for next week's episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care, Tim.
Okay, yeah, and you. Bye
Bye,
now.
folks.
Bye, everyone.